but at least it's something.
Ja gut, ich bin nicht weit genug mit dem Bleistift runtergegangen, um den Namen komplett aufzudecken. Okay, verstehe. Entschuldigt, dass es gerade am Anfang so ein bisschen abgehackt war. Ich hatte das ausgemacht. Das Problem ist nämlich, wenn man aus dem Spiel raustappt, loopt der letzte Sound, der gehört wird. Immer wieder. Das ist dann so dünn, 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 dünn. Damit ich das nicht die ganze Zeit hören muss, musste ich mal jetzt ganz schnell nochmal den Sound anmachen.
No time to wait.
Okay, Notizbuch. Oh Gott. So fucking viel zu tun. Leeres Stück Papier. Liste von Aktivitäten der Redites. Wir gehen zur Frau. Und diese Ruby ist für mich sehr interessant. McDonag's Wohnung. Sehr gut.
What? Who are you?
I'm Miles Fordham, private investigator. Your butler just announced me.
Oh, of course. Forgive me. I was just, well, never mind. Please make yourself comfortable, Mr. Fordham.
Thank you, Mrs. McDonough.
Okay. Jetzt setzt er sich.
I appreciate you seeing me, Mrs. McDonough. I know you must be going through a difficult time right now.
What exactly is it you want from me, Mr. Fordham? I already spoke to the police about my husband's murder.
I just have a few questions of my own.
Oh, very well.
Hui. Die ist ja grimmig aus. Hei.
What can you tell me about your husband?
I'll tell you the same thing I told the police, Mr. Fordham. Percival was one of the hardest working members of Parliament. He took his job extremely seriously. The recent election caused him a terrible amount of consternation, as I'm sure it did most people. He took Atwood's loss rather hard.
Did you see much of him?
I beg your pardon?
Surely someone with such an important position in government could find themselves consumed by their work. Did he spend much time at home?
He made it a point to come home and have dinner with me every night, even if he had to return to the office afterwards.
And did that happen often?
At least 3 or 4 times in a week, yes. He'd stay in his office working late into the night. As I said, he was very dedicated to his role.
Sounds to me like she's quite dedicated to hers, too.
Mm-hmm.
Did your husband have any enemies?
He was a politician, Mr. Fordham. Half the city hated him.
Did he ever receive any kind of threats against his life?
None that I was ever made aware of. I have no idea who could have killed him, let alone who could have gotten into his office to do it. He hadn't told me about any meetings or appointments this week either.
Was it his custom to inform you of his work affairs?
Oh, well, I've always taken an interest in my husband's work. He'd often mention initiatives he was working on or people he was meeting, that sort of thing. Nothing sensitive or confidential, you understand. Just conversation about his day.
Are you familiar with the art of cryptography, Mrs. McDonough?
What an odd question.
It's just I noticed several books on the subject in your husband's office.
Oh, well, yes. Percival was interested in cryptography and secret messages and the like. He would sometimes leave me coded notes when we first began courting many years ago.
What kind of notes?
Oh, now, Mr. Fordham, those were private. But Percival got a thrill out of knowing I was the only one who could read them. Sometimes he would write them using a special ink that would only appear when the paper was heated. I can't remember the last time he did that, though.
How are you feeling, Mrs. McDonough?
My husband of 42 years was shot in his office. How do you think I feel?
Tactful as always, Fordham. How do you do it?
My apologies. Perhaps that wasn't the most appropriate question. Is there anything I can do to help?
You can start by finding the monster who murdered Percival.
Are you familiar with someone named Ruby?
I can't say I am. Who is it?
Just a name that's come up in my investigation.
Sounds like the name of a trollop. Or perhaps a dog.
Do you know anyone named Shackley?
No, I've never heard that name before. Why?
I saw your husband had a meeting scheduled with him shortly before his murder.
That can't be right. He didn't tell me about that. He always told me about his meetings.
It was written on his office calendar, clear as day.
As I said, I don't know who that person is. Why wouldn't Percival have told me about their meeting?
Why indeed?
Can you think of any reason why your husband would have been murdered?
Not really. He was a vocal opponent of the construction of the Gascogne-Chumley Bridge, but I hardly think that would have been sufficient reason to drive someone to murder.
Why is that?
Well, it's just a bridge, isn't it? There are plenty of other ways to get to Chumley.
I meant, why was he opposed to it?
Oh, because the amount of money required to build it is exorbitant. Public funds should be used on roads and buildings that are falling apart. What's the point of having something shiny and new if everything around it is in disrepair?
Weil das nicht so ruhmreich ist.
Have you heard of the Justice Killer?
That was the name the police mentioned when they told me about Percival's murder. It's absolutely terrifying to think that one sick person could be capable of such evil. Why is he called the Justice Killer? What justice was done by murdering my husband?
I'm afraid I can't answer that right now, Mrs. McDonough, but I intend to find out. Those are all the questions I have for now, Mrs. McDonough.
All right, Mr. Fordham.
Just a painting of some boring old aristocrat. Surely this one was called Lady Felicity Euphemia Beaversnatch the Simple. They look expensive, but I bet they're totally worthless. I feel sorry for the sucker who has to clean them.
Oh,
Lord
noch mehr
Alfred
Porträts.
Edward Shufflebottom the Wise comes to mind when looking at this one.
Ah,
This one looks like a Lady Camilla Prudence Wigglewaddle the Grey.
aha. Und wen haben wir
I think
hier?
I'll call this one Lord Edmund Henry Lickspittle the Elder.
Ah, natürlich. The
They look
Elder.
expensive, but I bet they're totally worthless. I feel sorry for the sucker who has to clean them.
Okay, wir können rausgehen. Ach, Schnickschnack steht da ja wirklich einfach nur. Überall steht Schnickschnack. Okay.
If this actually works, I'll eat my hat.
Sehr einfach. Na gut, okay. Aber ich verstehe, ja. Liebste Mary, Worte können das von mir empfundene Bedauern und den Kummer darüber, wie ich mich gestern Nacht verhalten habe, nicht fassen. Wie ich kich. Ich hoffe zutiefst, dass du mir verzeihen kannst und dass ich dieses Monster nie wieder herauslasse. Percival.
Well, I'll be damned.
Das ist doch
Can we
irgendwie
talk some more, Mrs.
ein kleines
McDonough?
Muster, oder?
I suppose so, yes.
Ich glaube, die Ruby ist eine Prostituierte. Sie ist mit der Kaffeehausdame bekannt. Der Kutschenfahrer hatte viele bezahlte Damen. Sie steht im Kalender. Percival's Brief.
Do you know anything about this letter?
I'm afraid I don't have my spectacles. What is it?
The coroner found it in your husband's pocket. He gave it to me because he thought it was blank. But after you told me about your husband's propensity for writing secret messages, I decided to try exposing the paper to heat. Allow me to read it to you. Dearest Mary, words cannot express the regret and sorrow I feel for how I acted last night. I swore to myself I would never harm you again after the last time, but I have failed us both. It is my deepest hope that you can forgive me and trust that I will never allow this monster out again.
I see. May I have that letter, Mr. Fordham?
I'm afraid I have to keep it for now. It's evidence.
I suppose that does make sense.
Mrs. McDonough, did Percival mistreat or abuse you?
He wasn't a bad man, Mr. Fordham. I wouldn't have married him if he
redet er sich,
was.
ja, komm.
It's just the stress of his responsibilities would sometimes oppress him. I would try and offer comfort, soothe his nerves. But there were a few instances where he lost control of his passions.
Did he ever hit you?
Nett gesagt.
He did.
How many times did this happen?
Oh, I don't know. Maybe 2 or 3? You don't exactly count these things.
What a bastard. Maybe it serves him right for getting shot.
Thank you for your candor, Mrs. McDonough.
Can we please talk about something else?
Nein, wir reden über gar nichts mehr, denn ich gehe jetzt.
Those are all the questions I have for now, Mrs. McDonough.
All right, Mr. Fordham.
Ich gehe. Tschüssikowski, du Assi. Ach, Mann, ey. Entschuldigt. Ein bisschen spät schon langsam. Ah. Ruby. Aha, ha, 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 ha.